So, Brian, on to a little bit more of a positive note because we got
Yes.
some really exciting news past what happened earlier this afternoon. Malachi Fields, the star wide receiver for Virginia, entered the transfer portal, I believe, last week. If not, I think last week. And there had been some murmurs around where he was going to end up. And today we found out where that's going to be. And Malachi Fields is going to be wrapping up his college career in South Bend, Indiana in 2025.
It's exciting, isn't it? Right. This is a big one for Notre Dame. This is a big one, Trev. So as you kind of start to talk about, what this one means, this is what Notre Dame wanted in the portal. First of all, big picture. This is what Notre Dame wanted. They needed to go into the portal and get a receiver, an impact receiver, and Malachi Fields is that. But not only just a receiver, they also needed to go into this one and get a receiver that could play a specific role, that had a specific type of skill set. And that's also what Malachi Fields brings to the table, because he sort of brings that true boundary type of presence that you really haven't had since 18 and 19, when you had Miles Boykin in 18 and then Chase Claypool in 2019. That 6'4", long-armed, long-legged, vertical type of football player that could win contested throws, could impact the football game in that way, could move around a little bit, but he's primarily an outside guy. And in Notre Dame's offense, that boundary guy. I mean, he's not Brian Thomas, right? I'm not saying he's Brian Thomas, but I'm simply making a point. When you look at Mike Denbrock's offense at LSU, he had a boundary guy that they could threaten teams with. In Brian Thomas could run not only the comebacks and the stops like Bo Collins can do, but was a genuine stretch the field type of guy. Now, again, Malachi Fields is not Brian Thomas. If he was Brian Thomas, he'd be going pro and be a first-round draft pick. I'm not saying that. I'm talking about usage-wise, body type-wise, and then that element that he added to the offense. And they were looking for that in the portal. And there was a lot of names that went into it. But as we kind of dive into the backstory in this one, Trevor, this was one where if Malachi Fields, this was a lot like Riley Leonard's recruitment last year. If Malachi Fields jumped into the portal, this was their guy. And I heard a lot of other names, Alec Ayomanor. I heard about Eric Singleton and all these other names that they talked to. This was the one constant that if he jumps in the portal, they are going to go hard after Malachi Fields. This is the guy they wanted. Now, and the reason I compare it to Riley Leonard is part of that is their own defense had to study this kid and prepare for this kid. Because if you remember, part of the reason Notre Dame made such a hard run at Riley Leonard is because their defense was like, this kid's a nightmare to game plan for. He's a nightmare to prepare for. And we did not like facing him. We were concerned about that. And if you look at the second half of that game, I mean, Riley Leonard kind of put that team on his shoulders and did the best he could to try to lead them back and gave them a late lead over Notre Dame before Notre Dame was able to pull it out in the final minute of the game. And that's what Notre Dame was looking for. In the second half of the season, that's what Notre Dame has gotten from Riley Leonard. And this was a similar one to where it's like, look, our corners know what it's like to cover this kid. Christian Craig got beat by him. He had a 20-plus yard gain on the second drive of the game. Or was it the first drive of the game? But it was early in the game. First quarter had a big play on it. This is a kid that had a big game against Louisville this year. And he did all that, Trevor, with a very shaky quarterback situation.
Yeah.
Very shaky quarterback situation. So when you just talk about backstory and you think about what Notre Dame's needs were, they wanted a tall, big-bodied, stretch the field, boundary type of player. And if Malachi jumped in the portal, he was going to be their top target. And the minute he jumped in the portal, they went hard after him. Penn State went hard after him. But this one was one from the minute he jumped in, all my sources were like, Notre Dame's going to be really hard to beat for that kid. Really hard to beat. And they were able to get it done and get this commitment. This is a huge, huge pickup for Notre Dame from a backstory standpoint. We'll dump into his game and the fit and all that kind of stuff. But I just like the fact that Notre Dame is not changing their portal stance this offseason. And what I mean by that is Notre Dame is embracing the portal, but they're embracing it in a specific way. We're looking to fill needs, not rebuild the roster. We're looking to fill needs, meet specific needs. They're losing their nickel. They've gone out in the portal and got a nickel. They need a big-time boundary receiver. Their starting boundary receiver this year is gone. Bo Collins is done after this year. They don't have a lot of natural, pure boundaries on the roster, which we'll break down in a second. They went after him. They're sort of much more targeted in how they're going at the portal. And if you look at most of the good teams in the country, most of them are not teams that have rebuilt their entire roster with the portal. Oregon certainly has some really good portal players, but it's not a ton of them. They're impactful. Dylan Gabriel, Evan Stewart, some guys like that, but it's not a huge number. Ohio State's got some portal guys. Caleb Downs, Quinshaw Judkins, but the majority, Will Howard, but the majority of their roster is homegrown, right? I mean, I think that's true of a lot of Texas. They got some portal guys, especially receiver, right? Where it's a little bit, but their offensive line, homegrown. You know, their running backs, I believe, are all homegrown guys. A lot of their defense, Anthony Hill and a lot of those guys, they're homegrown players. And then they fill the needs where they need them to fill at receiver. And yeah, they went out and got Matthew Golden, and they got the Bolden kid from Oregon State. But another player that's really stepped up for them, the receiver this year, is Ryan Wingo, true freshman, homegrown. And so those are things that you look at and say the teams that are the true title contenders are the teams that are primary. Georgia's another example. Georgia has some portal guys, but they're primarily a very high percentage of homegrown players. Guys that only know the Georgia way of doing things, the Notre Dame way of doing things. Michigan was that way last year. Michigan had some starters from the portal. The Wallace kid at corner was a portal guy. They had a linebacker that was a portal guy. They had a couple offensive linemen were portal guys, but they were primarily homegrown. And I think most of the best teams in the country are guys that are homegrown. The majority of their roster is homegrown. And that's what Notre Dame is looking to do in the portal this year. And I think that's the winning strategy. And this was arguably the biggest need that they had. Is like, I didn't necessarily want them to, I was not like gung-ho, like go get a receiver. You need a bunch of receivers. I was more, if you're going to not play your young guys next year, you better get a dude. And I think Malachi Fields is a dude. And that's why I think this is a big one. And we'll start to break down his game and some other aspects here next, Trev. But I thought it was kind of important to lay that background of who he is. Oh, and by the way, he was a team captain for UVA this past year. So you're getting a guy that his teammates thought was a leader of that football team. And I think character matters. I mean, that's why Bo Collins was able to fit into the roster the way that he has. That's why Chris Mitchell, who was a 1,000-yard receiver last year, doesn't get a ton of touches this year, has not become a cancer in the locker room because you got a kid that has some character to him. That's an important piece. R.J. Oben hasn't been the player at Notre Dame that we all hoped he would be. Hasn't become a cancer in the locker room. He's like, look, I'm embracing my role. You need that type of high character player. From everything I've heard, Malachi Fields is that kind of player. The difference is this is a higher level of talent than maybe what we've seen in a lot of different places.
Well, exciting. It's really exciting. You know, Notre Dame, I believe, is doing the portal the right way, as are some other teams. But there are teams in college football that they kind of just like to go big game hunting. You know, like they just like to go out, they hear a big name and enter the portal, and they just go out and throw a bag at the kid and it kind of just say, hey, look who we had. But Notre Dame, other teams that you mentioned, Georgia, Texas, Ohio State, you know, they looked at the makeout and the layout of their team, and they were like, hey, what do we need? You know, like what can we go address? And it's a great fill. And I know we're about to dive into what this looks like for Notre Dame and 2025 and the rest of the receiving room, but I don't think it's a mystery to anybody that top end skill in the wide receiver room has kind of been lacking over the last couple of years. Because really the last big impactful receiver Notre Dame had like that was a Chase Claypool in 2019. You could make the argument for Kevin Austin in 2021, but it was kind of up and down. You saw the potential there. But Malachi Fields has the opportunity to be a 2019 Chase Claypool, to be a 2018 Miles Boykin.
Certainly Miles Boykin from 18.
Yeah.
Right? Certainly that. The other thing I love about him too, Trevor, and you're going to like this, he's a high school quarterback. So, there's a level of football IQ there, in my opinion, of how you see the game. I love guys that played quarterback in high school. And maybe it's biased because that's kind of what I was, a high school quarterback that moved to receiver and, late in my high school career and then freshman year of college before I moved back to quarterback. But I love guys like that. Lou Holtz Anquan Bolden was that in high school. Anquan Bolden was a dude at quarterback in high school. Now they were a running team and all that, but like he had that. That's why Anquan Bolden wasn't like an elite athlete. He wasn't like a 4.3 40 guy, but he knew how to get open, man. Because he was a quarterback. He understood that game from that level. And so I like that aspect of what Malachi brings to the table as well. And that could be my personal bias because of my own background, but I just feel like there's a lot of guys that are like that. Really good receivers under the radar. It's partly why he wasn't a big time recruit. It's from Charlottesville, Virginia. Like that's another interesting piece about that. And that's a really big pickup.
Yeah. No, it's massive, and I'm excited for it. I'm happy that he chose South Bend. It's filling a big need, and not only is it filling a need for next year, but you do have the young guys. I mean, give Micah Gilbert and Cam Williams some time with Malachi Fields in the offseason. You know what I mean? When will he get to campus? Will he be on campus in January, or is it going to be?
I don't know.
Okay.
I will try to find that answer out, but I don't know the answer to that again.
Okay.
At this point in time.
No worries. So we're talking real highly about Malachi Fields. It's really exciting for when he's going to get to South Bend and the impact that he's going to have on the field. And what have you seen from him on film that kind of gives you I don't know, just the confidence that he's going to come in and make an immediate impact?
I mean, the first thing is easy, right? You don't have to be a great at film breakdowns to notice the first thing on film is this kid is big. And I don't mean big like thick, but he's 220, but he's 6'4", really long arms, really long legs, huge catch radius. He brings size to the table. And Bo brings that to a degree, but you just kind of see these two kids next to each other, and it's just like there's a clear difference between the size that Malachi Fields possesses and the size that Bo Collins possesses. And he's got that experience playing as an outside guy. Now Virginia would move him around. He'd play in the slot at times, but he was primarily an outside guy. He'd play field and boundary, but he's primarily an outside guy. But it's the size. That's the first thing you notice, Trevor. And the second thing you notice is he's a legit vertical threat. And he looks more like Miles Boykin as a runner than he does Chase, because he's like that long-limbed guy that doesn't look like he's fast, and then the next thing you know, he's kind of running by you because he is so long-limbed, very high-cut kind of guy, when body type-wise, but he's a legitimate stretch-the-field type of player. Virginia didn't use him as much on that as they probably should have because that's not their offense. It's much more of a short to intermediate type of offense, but he has that ability. He's shown that ability to be that kind of down-the-field player, and that's the second thing that you see, Trev, is a guy that has athleticism. He's a pretty smooth athlete. He's not really stiff and tight like you'd expect from a guy that's as high cut as he is. He's also not like super shifty. I mean, he's not going to, no one's going to confuse him for Zachariah Branch, you know what I mean? Who George has got in the portal or going to get in the portal. I don't, has that official yet? Or is that just kind of what people are reporting? But they're a very different type of athlete than that, but he's got some smoothness to him that you like in a big guy. So athletically, he brings that to the table. He gets off the line pretty well. It plays with some urgency coming off the line as a route runner. Shows the kind of foot quickness you like to be a good top-end guy to gain separation. You can get out of his breaks pretty quickly. And just overall is a solid route runner, but it's that down-the-field ability that you really like. And in the final piece of this, Trev, and I want to get your thoughts on what you see from him on film is he's got really strong hands. He had 6 drops last year, only had 2 this year, and he's had 8 drops in the last 2 years on about 200 targets. He had 2 drops this year on almost 100 targets. But not only that, but it's just you watch him catch, and almost every catch that he makes is away from his body. Like even on slants and posts, he's snatching the ball out of the air. He attacks the football. And I love guys like that because that tells me that's a confident football player. That's also a lot where you see a little bit of a quarterback background because quarterbacks are used to going and getting the football. Perhaps that came from his quarterback days, but he attacks the football really well with his hands. Now, there's times where I'd like to see him attack it better with his body, where he'll kind of stand on the stop route and like reach his hands out, but his body's stationary, and that allows the guy to get behind him. I'd like to see him maybe step to the ball a little bit better on some stops and comeback type routes, but he attacks the football real effectively, has really strong hands, good body control on down the field throws, catches the ball in traffic over the middle of the field. And just has an overall very strong catching ability in a lot of different ways. Not just catch radius, not just length to attack the football, just overall body control. He tracks the ball very well on downfield shots also, which I like. That's an important piece of this, and just gives you a really nice, impressive weapon to attack people with, and he brings a ton to the table in that regard. Works past 10 a lot. Like, obviously Virginia's offense, how it is, Trev. There's a lot of short stuff there too. But if you look at his numbers from Pro Football Focus, he had 15 catches that he caught the ball from 10 to 19. And then he had 5 catches that he caught the ball past 20. So like I said, they didn't ask him to do it a ton this year, but he can do it, and he's pretty good at it. When they give him a chance to do it, they just don't do that because that's not really their offense, and they don't really have quarterbacks that are throw the ball down the field kind of guys, and they can't really protect the quarterback all that well. So those are all aspects to it, but this is a guy that brings a high level of talent to the table. Oh, and here's another interesting thing, Trev, about him too. So he had – let me pull up the article I had today because this is really interesting because you see it on film, and then there's parts of it you want to – okay, well, do the numbers back up what my gut tells me? But this past season, let me find that number. He had 278 yards after the catch. Now, keep in mind, he had 808 catches or yards this year. 278 of that was after the catch, and he forced 12 missed tackles. Notre Dame's leading receiver in yards after the catch was Jaden Greathouse at 175. And then their leading receiver in forced missed tackles, it was a tie between Chris Mitchell and Bo Collins, who both had 6. So he's not just a guy that catches the ball and goes down. And that's where he's a little bit more like Chase. Because Miles was kind of like catch it, and if he was over top of you, he was going to outrun you. But he was more catch it, and that's where he's going down. Back shoulders, in cuts, catch it, and he's going down. Not a lot of his throws were like we saw against LSU where he catches it, makes dudes miss, and then that's not primarily what Miles did. His work was done prior to and at the catch point, where Chase in 19 brought a little bit more of he could do some stuff after the catch as well. And I think that's where Malachi is got some more similarities to Chase, is his ability to do some things after. He's not going to look like Randy Moss after the catch, right? But he's not just a catch it and that's where it's going to go down type of guy. And that's important because we saw that, from Bo Collins against Indiana. Bo catches that 3rd down and 6, or was it 3rd down and 10? No, 3rd down and 6, short of the sticks, makes the guy miss, gets outside, picks up the extra yards. Malachi brings minimum of that to the table. But he also does some things where, like we saw from Bo early in the year, where you can still throw your screen game to him and do some things like that. So you're not losing that with Malachi coming in and losing Bo. Right. And that's an important piece to this as well. And a good fit into the Notre Dame offense.
Yeah. When I break down his film, he was significantly better after the catch than I thought. Because initially, you see the height and weight, right? You see 6'4", 220. It's like, oh boy, let's see. Like I knew how good he was from watching him go against Notre Dame. Right. But you still just kind of have that, was he just having a good game? Was Christian Gray kind of still battling back from injury? Both of those things were kind of true. And, then I got into his film, and he does a really good job of getting yards after the catch. He's not just a catch it and go down guy. I think he's a really good route runner. He does a good job of stacking corners, that's been an issue in Notre Dame's receiving room this year at times. We brought it up in the IU game. Jordan Faison stacks that corner. That's a touchdown, but it's different things like that.
He's 5'10",
right?
You know what I mean? Like, it's going to be harder for a guy like that.
Totally.
This is a 6'4" guy to your point. This is a 6'4" guy that brings a little bit of a different body type to the table.
Mm-hmm. But he is very athletic. He can stretch the field, and he kind of runs like Riley Leonard. You know what I mean? Just a long strider, doesn't look like he's going to blow by you until you take a bad angle, and then he's gone. He's out the gate. But he just brings a different dynamic to that receiver room, and I think he's going to complement the other guys in that room well, which I know we're going to talk about here in a second. But his film specifically, he's much better after the catch, and I thought he does a really good job of high pointing the football. He's very, very competitive for the football, which I like. There have been multiple times this season when a Notre Dame receiver has the opportunity to go up and make a one-on-one catch, and it's just you don't see a whole lot of fight from the football. You understand this. I understand this. The people in the chat understand this. It's unrealistic that the quarterback is going to throw a picture-perfect football to you every time, which is why having a guy like Malachi Fields, who's 6'4", 220, he's athletic, he can go up and get the football. especially with guys like, Anthony Calandria, who's not like the most accurate passer in the world, throwing some passes up to him, he's been able to go and make some things happen. So his film is really, really impressive. It's going to be really exciting to watch him next year.
The other thing too, Trevor, is Notre Dame's going to have a different type of quarterback next year. No matter who it is. Like this isn't even saying, hey guys, it's going to be CJ Carr. CJ, Kenny, or Steve. Any three of those guys are in the starting lineup. It's a different dynamic than what they have now with Riley, where you're going to need your receivers to bail you out of trouble more than you did this year, where Riley could use his legs. So there's a corner fire. Riley can make dudes miss, get out the pocket, take off. Next year, you're not going to be able to do as much of that. They're going to have those, okay, they're bringing pressure. I've got to be able to throw that ball up and protect myself by getting the ball outside, more like what we saw when we broke down Indiana's film with Curtis Rourke. Now,
yeah,
CJ Carr and Kenny Minchie and Steve Angeli are all better athletes than Curtis Rourke. That's not the point. The point, however, is that they're not Riley Leonard. They're not going to be scrambling around and doing a lot of those things. They're going to need to beat the pressure with their arm, with their decision-making, their arm, and their accuracy. And that requires you to have, in my opinion, in Mike Denbrock's offense, more of that bigger boundary type of player. And the fact that Notre Dame didn't have that at times in 2015 did give them some problems. When you look at like Clemson in 2015, they were just bracketing Will Fuller in that game. And they basically said, Will Fuller's not going to beat us. Somebody else got to beat us. And nobody could really step up and make those plays because the boundary receiver in that offense was 185 pounds and Chris Brown. And so when teams could kind of run with them or get physical with them, there were times when the guys not named Will Fuller had some issues. Now, it doesn't mean Chris Brown didn't also step up at times. He was huge against Boston College, right? And he caught a touchdown pass against Ohio State to make it a 28-21 game. But you're having a guy like this is, along with having Eli Raridan and Cooper Flanagan and Jack Larson and James Flanagan at tight end, is great for a pocket quarterback. And even though Kenny and CJ and Steve are all good athletes, none of those kids are stiffs, but they're more scramble, tuck it and run. And, they're just not Riley Leonard. They're pocket guys. Having a big body like this in the boundary with your tight ends is huge when it comes to how you're going to attack the pressure next year, because Mike Denbrock's going to have to really attack teams differently next year with the quarterbacks he's going to have. And I think he wants to. I think he loves Riley Leonard. But when you look at the quarterbacks Notre Dame has recruited really since Mike Denbrock got here, because remember, Deuce Knight committed to Notre Dame before Mike Denbrock was hired.
Yep.
Not that Mike Denbrock didn't like Deuce. He did. And trust me, Mike Denbrock would have loved coaching Deuce. But even though Blake Hebert's a really athletic kid, he projects as a pocket passer who is athletic, not as the next Riley Leonard. Noah Grubbs, pure pocket passer. Pure 100% pocket passer. That ultimately is what Mike Denbrock wants. He coached to Riley's skill set this year. But ideally, what he will want when it's him building the roster is the drop back, throw the ball type of guys. And that's what makes having guys like Malachi Fields so important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's how he fits in schematically. I think he's going to pair well, to your point. I think you brought up a good point of who else is going to be in there with him personnel-wise. You have a big, athletic boundary receiver in Malachi Fields, kind of pairing up with the Jordan Faisons of the world. The quicker, shiftier guys. It puts defense in more of a bind. It puts them in a spot where they have to be ready for multiple different things. Because we've kind of talked about, like, Notre Dame hasn't really had that dominant boundary receiver. Really since 2019. There have been moments, but not like that, right? And so I think he's going to pair really, really well with the rest of the wide receiver room. And like I said before, like I think it's really going to be exciting to watch the Micah Gilberts of the world, who's another kind of big-bodied kid. You have Cam Williams coming in and, learning from him too. And not to mention, you have an entire true freshman class incoming who are all like pretty raw kids, give Scrap Richardson some time with Malachi Fields to sit back and learn a couple things, and so it's going to be interesting to see how that goes, because he was a captain of the Virginia football team. And so he has kind of that natural leadership quality to him, which is exciting. But he's not. I mean, Notre Dame just didn't go to the portal to get a guy that's just a great leader, and he speaks well and carries himself well. He's also a dude on the football field, which is really exciting, really, really exciting. I mean, so outside of the young guys, what else you think it could mean for that wide receiver room in 25?
Well, I mean, you've got to be careful with how Notre Dame is going to recruit the portal this year and at receiver, because you do have a lot of guys in the roster that they like. I've talked to people around the program. They love Cam Williams' potential. He just was raw. He needed work. They love Micah Gilbert's potential. He just didn't feel that they wanted to put him out there, right? There's a lot of people that like Logan Saldate. And so you've got these younger players that you need to develop. This doesn't mean, okay, well, now Micah Gilbert's going to be relegated to 0 snaps again next year. Now Micah Gilbert's competing to be that guy in the rotation with Malachi that's learning from Malachi, but is also capable of playing other spots if he can go out there and earn a spot this summer and in spring and summer, and could maybe play X and Z in this offense. And Cam Williams is a guy that could play Z and a little bit of X. And so you've got a guy in Malachi Fields who brings a lot of experience to the table. He brings a lot of production to the table. He brings leadership to the table. So you're going to have a veteran guy for them to continue to learn under, like you hope they have with Bo and Chris Mitchell this year. And so I think that's an important piece to this as well, is you've got to be real careful that you don't sacrifice. Like if you're to tell me, okay, Bryan, by getting Malachi Fields, you're going to, for 1 year, you're going to lose Micah Gilbert and Cam Williams. I'd be like, I'm not taking that deal. I'm not taking that deal. You've got to make sure you can keep those kids on the team. And I think that then the message is, hey, fellas, this doesn't mean that you're not going to play. This just means we've got a guy that we know, a proven guy into the boundary. Micah, you're still going to play if you go prove yourself this offseason. Cam, you're still going to have a chance to play if you prove yourself this offseason. And so the positive is you have a guy that they can learn under. You have a proven guy that has done it for now 2 years in a row. Third-team All-ACC player this past year, in a year where the ACC had some really productive wide receivers.
Yeah.
And did it with a very mediocre, is that being nice, mediocre quarterback situation. Yeah. I'm trying to be kind today because I was pretty mean to some people yesterday. And I still feel really terrible about cursing in the show yesterday. But you're talking about a situation here, Trev, where you now we know what this guy can do. We know who he is. We know what he can do. That doesn't mean that those other guys won't get chances to go out there and be productive. Man, I'll just say it. He was in an offense this year where the quarterbacks threw 16 touchdown passes and 14 interceptions, and 6.9 yards per attempt. That,
I'll say it. That's bad.
Yeah. I mean, as a team, they averaged 11.2 yards per catch. He was at 14.7. He had a third of their touchdown receptions. So I mean, this is a system that's they're going to want to throw the ball more next year. That's the selling point to Malachi Fields, but that's also the selling point to the other receivers. Guys, you know who we have at quarterback. Our stat line is going to look different next year.
100%.
You know our offense is going to look different next year. We're not going to ask you guys to do what we're doing with Riley, right? And so I think that's the selling point to those receivers is, fellas, you're going to get your opportunities. You were young this year. You were freshman this year. Next year is going to be your chance to step in and become more of a factor. And that's got to be the selling point, because you've got to keep those kids in here and keep on them working. Because the ideal situation is, no matter what they do with Malachi Fields, or if they go out and get another receiver in the portal, the message is going to be, that doesn't mean that you're not going to play. Because listen, I here's something I do know about a fact about Notre Dame's coaching staff. If they got to give a kid an NIL deal to get him here, but somebody on the current team beats out that guy, they're going to play the guy that beats out that guy. Yeah. We saw that at safety, right? They brought in Rod Hurd to be the starter. Adon Schuler beat him out. He starts. Rod Hurd's in the rotation, and it's worked out really well. So, that's the thing these guys have to understand is look, Malachi's going to play for Notre Dame. He's going to be a dude, but that doesn't mean you're not going to be part of this as well in an offense where we're going to throw the football more next year and differently next year than what we're seeing right now. And I think that's going to be the big thing is convincing those young guys that, hey, this doesn't mean you got to now wait a whole nother year to go be a player. And I think that's an important part of the sales pitch that Notre Dame's going to have to do, because you got to re-recruit your whole roster again every year. It's disgusting, but that's what you have to do. And that's where bringing in kids like this can get a little bit tricky. Now, like, this doesn't impact Jaden Greathouse. It doesn't impact Jordan Faison as far as, like, he's not going to be competing with them for the same position. He's a boundary guy. And, but this will impact Micah Gilbert potentially, Cam Williams potentially, and Jaden Thomas potentially, like Deion Colsey potentially, as far as, there's not the need to bring both of them back next year. So I think those are all factors that kind of play into this conversation, Trev, of how it impacts the roster. I think it's going to impact some of the who comes back for a fifth year conversation. And you're going to have to sit down and have some heart-to-hearts with your younger players and let them know that this doesn't mean that they're riding the bench for another full year.
Yeah, I think for the younger players, the conversation, it's that and conversation. We can bring in a top-level talent, we being the Notre Dame coaching staff, but also we can still develop you and get you out on the field, because I do believe that the Notre Dame coaching staff understands that the best way to develop your players is getting them reps in game. Like, it's hard to replicate game speed in practice, right? And yeah, it was cool to see Micah Gilbert in there for some mop-up minutes. I know Cam Williams had one snap this year when Steve Angeli took a knee, at the end of the Virginia game. But yeah, I definitely think it's an and. That's kind of the conversation that you have with those younger guys.
And it needs to be real too.
100%.
Right? It can't just be words, because I think those are still, like, Micah Gilbert and Cam Williams are very talented young players that just the staff didn't feel ready. Now, whether they were or weren't and didn't get their shot, that's a different conversation for a different day. The fact is, they didn't play a whole lot.
Yeah.
They're too talented to be sitting on the bench for 2 years. And that's the risk. That's the concern I have if Notre Dame goes out there and fills up with receivers in the portal again.
Sure.
Right? Are you going to not promote those kids, give those kids more opportunities to compete for a rotation spot this year than you did last year? Are you going to allow KK Smith to push more? Are you going to allow Cam Williams to push more? Are you going to allow Micah Gilbert to push more? And those are the conversations you need to have, because that also, again, we're talking about playing a 16-game season. If you can get the same kind of production from Malachi Fields that Virginia got, and that's something, we'll talk a little bit too about the fit into the offense here, Trev. Yeah. There are a couple things I wanted to get to also, but here's kind of my point on Malachi, on this is, if you can get Malachi Fields to be the impact player that he was at Virginia, but doing so maybe on, 10 to 12 fewer snaps a game, 15, 20 fewer snaps a game, partly because of blowouts, which he was not in a whole lot unless they were getting blown out, which sometimes they left him in the game in those situations.
Sure.
But where you're blowing somebody out, but hey, we're going to play 65 snaps. We want you to play 50. We want Micah Gilbert to play the other 15. And then Micah can get some touches in those 100. I mean, now that puts Micah Gilbert on pace for almost 200 snaps by the end of the regular season. Plus, you got 4 playoff games, hopefully. So those are aspects of it too, Trev, that I think that you're selling to those kids. Is like, listen, guys, this is a different deal, and stay hungry, keep working. And then it's up to Mike Brown to say, hey, look, man, you need to teach Micah Gilbert or Malachi Fields what you're looking for in this offense, but you need to make sure you're spending more time on getting those young bucks ready to go as well. That's going to be his challenge this offseason. You're going to prove yourself a good receiver coach, not by Malachi Fields producing, because you're bringing Malachi Fields here because you think he's already ready to step in and do that. You're going to be judged on how ready, what level can you get Jaden Greathouse to climb to next year, and how ready can you get KK Smith, Cam Williams, and Micah Gilbert. That's going to define Mike Brown as a position coach. If those guys are sitting on the bench again next year, I'm going to have serious questions about Mike Brown as a developer of players. But if they can get those kids ready to play, even if it's 15 to 25 catches, and that's the range that they're in next year, that's fine. That's getting them ready to go. And then you don't have to go back to the portal in 2026 because Micah Gilbert's stepping into that role or Cam Williams is stepping into that role. That's the important piece of this is so the best coaches can do that. Coach up the veterans while you're getting the young guys ready to go. Mike Mickens clearly did that, getting his veterans and starters ready to go while also working on getting Leonard Moore ready to go. And that's where you need to get to with these guys when you look at it from how this impacts the rest of the receiver depth chart.
Absolutely.
The final thing with that real quick, you also don't have to force anybody else into the boundary that's not necessarily a pure boundary guy because they don't have a lot of guys like him. So now you don't have to now, like, let's say they decide to bring Jaden Thomas back next year. If it was up to me and Jaden wanted to come back and you wanted Jaden Thomas back, I'm putting Malachi and Micah Gilbert into the boundary. And I'm getting Jaden Thomas back to being a slot outside movement guy, right? And not sticking him into the boundary where I don't think his game is ideally suited. That's another thing too is, we talked about, like, if you don't get a boundary receiver, you may have to use Cam Williams there also next year. And I don't know that that's the ideal place to put Cam next year. So now you don't have to worry about who are we going to have to cross train over at boundary this year. You're good. You got Malachi, you got Micah Gilbert, and maybe Jaden Thomas. You're set. You're good there. You can let those other guys work on the field positions, and that's going to be key. Yeah,
no, absolutely. And to your point, it almost frees up, room to move people back to where they're the best fit. So speaking of Malachi Fields' best fit, in the offense, you've talked a lot about the boundary position. What is that going to look like specifically for him? Like, how is he going to be used specifically?
So some of it we've seen this year, right? Some of it'll be what we saw with Bo Collins. He'll be a guy that you're going to get some tunnel screens to. He's a guy you're going to run some of the quick game snag concepts, RPO glance routes, things like that. He's a bigger target, even a bigger target than Bo. He's thicker than Bo. I mean, Bo is 6'3". What's Bo Collins' weight? He's like barely, I think he's
205.
But he's thin. He's not a real big guy. This is a kid that's got 15 extra pounds on him. He's a broader shouldered kid. Gives you just a little bit of a bigger target than Bo. This isn't knocks on Bo. It's just comparing where their difference is. But a lot of the stuff that we saw from Bo, the snag routes, the glance routes off the RPO, the out cuts, the tunnel screens, we're going to see all that stuff. The intermediate things that you need in the boundary, the comeback routes, the stop routes, those are things that Malachi does really well. And the thing I like about what Malachi does is Malachi does a nice job of really selling that vertical route and then snapping it off and giving himself separation to catch those comebacks and stop routes. Plus, with this catch radius, you'll see sometimes where the kids will undercut him and then just throw the ball high and let him go up and get it. So you're going to see a lot of that stuff. He's a guy that can work the middle of the field. He can work the in cuts, the dig routes, the over routes that Notre Dame likes to run a lot of. Where you're going to see a bit of a difference with him from what we saw this past year is not only because of him. It's going to also be because you're going to have a different quarterback. You're going to see more vertical stuff from the boundary next year with Malachi than you saw this year with Bo. And again, that's not – I mean, part of it is I do think that Malachi is a better vertical threat than Bo. I do. I just think he's – like, they're similar in certain ways, but I just think Malachi is just better. But it's also – you didn't use Bo on a lot of that stuff because you don't really have a quarterback that's a let's throw the deep ball a ton type of guy. Next year, you're going to have a little bit better – you're going to have a little bit more of a room that is geared more towards, hey, let's take some post shots. Let's take some outside go throws when we're getting cover one. Let's throw some more back shoulders. Riley has never struck me as a great back shoulder thrower. I know he hit the one to Bo in the opener, but have we seen him really attempt a whole lot of back shoulder since then? Not really. And he's missed on some of them. That's just not his game, or at least it hasn't been so far this year. CJ and Kenny and Steve, even to a degree, I think better project to throw more of some of those type of throws. So not that they weren't doing it because Bo couldn't catch it. I don't know that you just necessarily felt like it was a big part of who you are from a quarterback situation. Malachi does this at a very high level. So I think you're going to see more of them be willing to say, hey, we got the one-on-one in the boundary side with Malachi. Get it out. Get the ball out to him. Throw the football to him. We got the one-on-one. Let's take that shot. So I think you're going to see more of the go stuff next season, more of the vertical back shoulder type throws, some more post concepts. Notre Dame likes to run a lot of burst. Well, Mike Denbrock liked to run some burst corner routes at LSU. Burst corners and a corner from the outside guy. You work in, get vertical, and then take it back out. It's called a burst corner. I think things like that are going to be a little bit more prominent, partly because of the quarterback, but also partly because Malachi's good with that type of stuff, and he's a really wide target. So I think those are some all different concepts that we're going to see more of next year. It's not going to look like, wow, this is a completely different position. You're going to see a lot of the same stuff you saw with Bo. But Trevor, and I'd be curious your thoughts on this if you see it the same way I do. I think there's a lot of things where you're going to see more 15 and beyond stuff next season. Not a ton of it. Like you're not going to throw 8 go balls a game, but more of the 18 to 20 back shoulder, the dig concepts. You know, Mike Denbrock loves to run a lot of those backside dig concepts. Well, that's not really Riley's game. We saw CJ Carr do that like 3 times in the Jersey scrimmage. And then we saw him do it again in the blue gold game. We've seen Kenny bang that route in practice and in scrimmages. That's not something that Riley has done a ton of this past season. And Malachi's a really good target. So I think in that regard, too, you're going to see more of that 15 to 25 stuff and then a few more deep shots. That's as much about quarterback as it is the receivers. And I do believe that Malachi brings a little bit more juice to the table than what Bo did. But I think Bo not running more vertical routes was as much about where they felt the offense as a whole was, more so than they didn't think Bo could do it.
Yeah, I think it's kind of twofold. You know, like I think that Riley Leonard kind of handicapped the offense from a passing perspective, just not able to do some of the things that they wanted to. Like, you know, I mean, you had a full breakdown on the slot fade and why Mike Denbrock loves running that, and it's not ran a ton.
It's gotten less and less the last month of the season.
And I just think it's something that I don't know if Riley's not comfortable with throwing it. I don't know if they don't like their matchup. One thing that I could see them doing with Malachi Fields is lining him up into the boundary, motioning him inside, and then just having him take off on a slot fade. You know, like that guy, especially like 30-yard and in, could be a mismatch. Now, I don't know how much motion he ran at Virginia, but
they usually stuck him somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But you know, I just to get him in some sort of favorable matchup, because I know Mike Denbrock is willing to run the slot fade when he gets a big body tight end on a linebacker or a tight end on a safety, but you know, Malachi Fields kind of brings that and has a little bit more juice. You know, he has a little bit more speed than what Eli Raridan does, if I'm being 100% honest, you know, but no, I think you'll see a much more vertical passing game next year, just because I think overall scheme fit, the personnel will be there for it. Right? Like you're going to have more of a traditional passing quarterback. You're going to have receivers that, you know, you could think remote, like across the board, they can relatively stretch the field vertically. We've seen Greathouse do it. We've watched Malachi Fields do it at Virginia. Jordan Faison can do it. You know, so it's going to be interesting to see what that looks like next year. But yeah, I mean, Malachi Fields can be used in a multitude of different ways, man. And I'm going to be excited to see what Denbrock does with him. That's for sure.
Well, and he's going to have quite a better supporting cast around him this year. 2 years ago, he had Malik Washington with him, and they were a really good 1-2 combination. I mean, really good 1-2 combination. This year, he was just kind of it at receiver. I mean, really. I mean, they didn't have weapons that anybody else was worried about. You're going to have more of that next year. You're going to have Eli Raridan and Cooper Flanagan at tight end. You're going to have Jaden Greathouse going to his junior year. You're going to have Jordan Faison, hopefully healthy. You're going to have hopefully Cam Williams stepping up or KK Smith stepping up and some of those guys coming in. So, and then, of course, you're going to have Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price in the backfield. So that's going to be something, too, is he's going to get more one-on-one. Hey, let's take them shots this year than maybe what you had last year.
Sure.
And I'm curious, too, is how Notre Dame recruits that position moving forward now that Mike Denbrock's fully in control is going to be interesting as well. You know, from the portal.
Yeah,
you know, from the portal, because I don't know that Jaden Harrison and Chris Mitchell were necessarily great fits for what Mike Denbrock did this year. What I don't know is that because of what they did and what he likes to do, or is that because of they had to maybe go a different direction because of what the quarterback was good at.
Sure,
that's going to be the interesting part to find out. And Malachi Fields is a guy that gives you he's not like way different than Bo Collins. He's just better and bigger and brings a couple things to the table that I think are just something they don't really have right now.
Sure. No, I agree. I mean, and like you said, it's no knock on Bo Collins. It's just an evaluation of two players. Right. You know what I mean? Like it is what it is. But seeing what Mike Denbrock's going to do, because like it's going to be interesting watching him. Obviously, he's going to be the offensive coordinator next year. But you could make the argument that the offense could look pretty different. You know, I mean, just based on the personnel groupings that they have. So, I'm going to be really interested to see what he does. Mike Denbrock does a really good job of adjusting his game plan to basically the assets that he has on offense.
Trev, another thing about this too, that at least what he has been at Virginia for the most part, is he's been a lot more consistent than what maybe we have seen in the past.
Sure.
From receivers. And when you look at him this year, not quite as much as last year, but this year in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of the 12 games he played in, he went for at least 60 yards in 7 of the 12 games. Last year, he went for at least 60 yards in all but one game. So 11 of the 12. He had at least 3 catches in all but 2 games. He had at least 4 catches had at least 4 catches in all but 2 games, at least 3 catches in all but 1 game. And he had at least 60 yards in 11 of their 12 games last season. This year, he wasn't quite as consistent. Again, a lot of that was quarterback, but he had more big games this year because they didn't have Malik Washington. And so he went for 5 for 100 against Richmond. He went for 11 for 148 against Wake Forest. He went for 9 for 129 against Louisville. So you saw more of those type of performances. But, look, he's going to be that 4 for 60 every game, and then occasionally he'll break out with a bigger game. That's kind of what you're hoping for. And the final piece is, like, when you look at what, Bo Collins did for Notre Dame this year, he basically was the same player he was at Clemson.
Yeah.
And that's not a bad thing. I don't say that as a shot at Bo Collins. It's just about when you talk about projecting to Notre Dame, he was slightly higher in reception percentage when targeted. He went from 61 to 63. Yards per reception is very similar. 13.4 at Clemson to 12.4 at Notre Dame. And part of that was because he had a big game against an FCS team. Last year, he had, let me pull it up. He had 7 for 137 against Charleston Southern, right? You're not playing that team at Notre Dame. At least this year, most years you're not. 2023 is a little different, but most years you're not playing that. But when you look at Bo's numbers, Bo was at Notre Dame what he was at Clemson. He didn't disappoint. It's who he was. You look at his overall production. There was a lot of similarities at Notre Dame than what he had at Clemson. He had 6 drops this season, or 7 drops this season. He had 5 last year at Clemson. He had 5 as a freshman at Clemson. That's just this is kind of part of his contested catch rate was 0.7 lower than it was at Clemson. Like he just was kind of that guy, that same guy, and had 2 fewer catches on 5 fewer targets. The numbers were very similar to last year. So if Malachi Fields simply repeats at Notre Dame what he did at Clemson, at Virginia, they're getting a big upgrade at the position because he's a guy that's been over 50 catches for over 800 yards in the last 2 years. And that's an upgrade.
It is.
That's a huge upgrade.
It is. It's a big upgrade at the position. It's something that's needed. And you can kind of go back and look at different position groups at various schools and like, hey, like this one player kind of changed the landscape and of what that position group did. Like you look at Notre Dame and you can make that argument about, like a Josh Adams at Notre Dame. Like that's kind of when it started that, hey, like Notre Dame running backs are kind of ones to look out for. Like you could include CJ Prosise, but like he came in like as a wide receiver.
Hicksy came in as a safety.
Oh, that's right.
And then
that's right.
Moved to receiver.
Gotcha. But then you have a guy like, Josh Adams who comes in and kind of from there, Notre Dame kind of had high caliber running backs. And now you look at it and they went from Kyron Williams to Audric Estime to now Jeremiah Love and kind of gets that ball rolling. I think Nick Saban was even quoted about saying like, hey, like Julio Jones came in and completely changed the landscape of what it was like recruiting receivers at Alabama. I don't know if Malachi Fields is that guy, but I think that he has the potential to kind of open the door a little bit for like, hey, like Notre Dame is a school that receivers should be excited to go to. Yeah. Now that also has to be paired up with a quarterback that is able to push the ball down the field with consistency, because we've seen it, it's few far in between, but Riley Leonard can push the ball down the field at times, but not to the degree that CJ can or Kenny can or even Steve can to some degree, right? So, but it's all going to be a good fit for Malachi next year. I
I swear, some people just love to complain. Dude literally said, "Are we sure it's an upgrade? Who has he played?" He's from the same conference that Bo Collins came from, dude. Same conference.
I mean, I'll tell you who he played. He played Notre Dame secondary.
Played
That's
the
who he
same
played.
league. Yes, and he had 4 catches for over 80 yards against Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Like what? Who has he played? He didn't come from the Conference USA, my dude.
Yeah.
He didn't come from the Sun Belt. He came from the ACC. Like, come on, dude. Like, come on. It's like, it's okay, guys. It's okay to be happy about something. It really is. It's okay to say, hey, this is a really good pickup. Bo Collins never had a year in college the way that Malachi Fields has had 2. Bo Collins most yards, and I like Bo. Bo's done some good things for Notre Dame. I don't know that they beat Texas A&M without Bo Collins. But the reality is Bo Collins coming to Notre Dame's most production was 510 yards and 5 touchdowns in 2022, 3, 5, and 3. He had 36, 38 catches. You know, his last actually at Clemson, he had 31, 22, and 38 catches. Malachi Fields has been significantly greater than in each of the last 2 years in the same league. Same league. So you don't know where he's coming from, who's he played, the same teams that Bo Collins played, and Notre Dame, where he had 4 catches for over 80 yards. So this is a good football player. And anyone that watches this film says, this is a really good football player.
Mm-hmm.
Is he Randy Moss? Is he Jeremiah Smith? No, because if he was, he'd be going pro. He'd be a top 10 NFL draft pick. This is a darn good football player who's going to come to Notre Dame and have better, even if Riley Leonard was your starting quarterback, would have significantly better quarterback play than what he's had the last 2 years at Virginia. Significantly so. So it's okay to be excited about that. It's all right. We won't punish you for actually being happy about something going on in Notre Dame football. Who's 12-1 and just landed a very, because like what you're seeing with a lot of these portal guys that people are fired up about. Well, it's because either A, they're SEC players, or B, they were highly ranked recruits. No one's excited about Zechariah Branch because of what he's done at USC. They're saying, hey, former 5-star recruit. I see people talking about like, oh, Miller Moss, somebody I saw second best portal pickup of the offseason. Based on what? His recruiting ranking? There's a reason he got benched at USC. You know, and it's like, I mean, people are talking, Kevin Concepcion would have been a great. Okay, maybe he would have, but here's what I know. Bo Collins provides a much better need from what you're looking for than what you got there. Right? I mean, here's what I know. Bo Collins or Malachi Fields this past year had 808 receiving yards. What did Concepcion have? 460. Right? The kid from Georgia Tech everybody loves, who is a very good football player. 754. Like, same league. Right? So, I mean, it's cool to be excited about stuff, man. Right? They say, I'm a wait and see kind of. No, that's not a wait and see comment. You made a comment of, well, who's he played against? That's different. It's a different conversation. It's a good football player that played at the Power 4 level and literally made 2 big plays against Notre Dame, who has a top 5 pass defense. If that doesn't say, hey, this kid's a pretty good pickup, then no, you're not a wait and see kind of guy. You're just being unnecessarily negative. Does he have to prove it at Notre Dame? Of course he does. But it's okay to be excited about it in the meantime. It's going to be all right. We're not going to punish you. We're not going to judge you negatively for being excited about what's going on right now with the team that's 12-1 and playing in the quarterfinals of the National College Football Playoffs. It's okay to be excited about that.
Mm-hmm.
It is.
Shoot, man, I'm excited. I'm excited for all of it. I do have a fun question before we get out of here, just in the spirit of holidays are coming up. And I was thinking about this earlier in the show, and I want to hear everybody else's answers in the chat too. If you could take 2 past Notre Dame wide receivers that didn't play together and use them as a wide receiver duo, who are you taking?
For this team?
Because
my answer is different depending on who my quarterback is.
That's a good question to answer a question. Okay, we'll do one for this year, and then then like what we think the passing offense is going to be next year. Not like guessing the starter, but like the downfield passing attack. I do believe no matter who starts, will be an upgrade from this year. So
Okay.
this year, who, and then next year?
With this year's team, it's Golden Tate and Michael Floyd. Because you've got a great boundary receiver in Michael Floyd. And Golden Tate can do a lot of the RPO screen game. I mean, think about all the tunnel screens they've run this year and the now screens they've run, the glance routes that they've run to the Z's and the slots. That's all going to Golden Tate. You talk about making plays after the catch. That's a dude that could do a lot after the catch. And then Michael Floyd's giving you your back shoulders, your comebacks, your, just throw it up and let him go get it. You like Will Fuller would be in my conversation, but like, he's a guy you're dropping back and launching it. And I don't know that fits what this offense is about.
Sure.
Just that drop back and launch the ball down the field kind of guy. You know what I mean? Riley Leonard's underthrown a couple times. Jordan Faison, who's a really quick athlete, but not a burner. He's probably a 4-5 guy, not a 4-3 guy.
Sure.
If CJ Carr or Kenny Minchie is my quarterback, I'd have a hard time not having Will Fuller out there with Michael Floyd. Michael Floyd's on there no matter who the quarterback is. Golden Tate, and I mean, you can't go wrong with Golden Tate, right? But if I'd love that complement of the possession nature of Michael Floyd with Will Fuller. And if you wanted to go Golden Tate and Will Fuller, cool. But with CJ Carr or Kenny Minchie quarterback of what we think the offense is going to be next year, it's Michael Floyd and Will Fuller, or Golden Tate and Will Fuller. But I don't know that Will Fuller's skill set would have been as well utilized on the current team as Golden Tate would. Oh my gosh, he'd put up numbers in this offense right now.
Yeah.
I mean, he'd be running reverses, jets, tunnels. I mean, he would eat. He would absolutely eat. Get CJ Carr in there, though, and Michael Floyd's going to put up 90 catches and 1,200 yards. You know what I mean? Or Kenny Minchie. So it just depends on who they are. And I'm going more modern players. The same thing like Rocket. Somebody said Rocket. But like in this offense, I don't know that Rocket would be as advantageous as like a Tim Brown would, who is, I guess I kind of feel like Rocket could play in any offense. But
sure.
Could you imagine this offense if they had a Rocket type player and Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price? Like, that'd be kind of fun. But like, you want to throw those guys the ball down the field, and that's just not Riley Leonard's game. Like, I think Riley Leonard can be he was a better deep ball thrower last year, like 2 years ago at Duke, than he has been at Notre Dame this year. But part of that's because he does, there's a lot of reasons why, but he hasn't been a great deep ball thrower this year. And so I don't know how much Rocket and Will Fuller would be maximized. But next year with CJ Carr or Kenny Minchie as your quarterback, yeah, those guys are in that conversation a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. I was going to go some combination of Golden Tate for on this team, some combination of Golden Tate, and then it's kind of like you can kind of fit in anybody else. I wouldn't do Will Fuller in this offense just because the most comparable person that Notre Dame has to Will Fuller on this team is like Chris Mitchell and KK Smith, and they just don't use them.
Right.
And so you could get Will Fuller and it'd be cool to, see number 7 streaking down the field again. But that's kind of all you would watch him do. You wouldn't watch him do his hurdle celebration into the end zone.
Because Deshaun Kaiser was such a great deep ball thrower.
Yeah, he was.
So was Malik.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Malik, there was you remember the throw he made against Virginia in 2015?
Yes.
That ball went over 60 yards in the air, and he hit Will Fuller in stride. And Will still had to kind of slow up a little bit.
I know. I
mean, he was so fast. And Malik had a bazooka connected to his left shoulder.
Yeah.
And he could still kind of, underthrow Will a couple times. And Riley's just not maximizing that. He's not. Golden Tate, he would eat in this offense.
Yeah. No, I mean, he's getting jet sweeps. He's getting the RPO glance routes. Like, it's all him, man. I mean, he's going nuts in this offense. Next year, if it's Kenny, CJ, like any combination of those, like I would love to see like a Will Fuller, Chase Claypool combo would be nuts. If you wanted to go tall, you could do like a Michael Floyd, Chase Claypool lineup. That would be insane. It's just, I was thinking about that when we were talking about, who Malachi Fields would be paired up with in this offense and who the room he's entering. And I'm like, I wonder what receiver combinations would be fun.
If you're going to include Malachi in the conversation, there's less of a need for Michael Floyd, right? Like if
True.
Let's just say we're going to go there and we have Malachi, I mean, Michael Floyd's a way better player than Malachi Fields. It's not, but you've already got that kind of guy. Then it's about complimenting what you have. Then it's okay. Give me Golden Tate in the slot and give me Will Fuller at Z.
No.
And now I'm eating.
With Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price at the backfield, holy.
But see, that's what's kind of frustrating with where Notre Dame is right now.
Yeah.
Because everybody acts like, well, Notre Dame's just not a school that can recruit receivers. That was true under Del Alexander, and it's sadly been true so far under the current receivers coach and the last two receivers coaches for the most part. I mean, they've gotten some Cam Williams and Micah Gilberts, but remember, there was a stretch where in a 2-year stretch, Notre Dame signed Equanimous St. Brown, Javon McKinley, Kevin Stefferson, Miles Boykin, Chase Claypool, CJ Sanders, and Jalen Guyton in a 2-year class. Think about that. That's insane.
Yeah.
You know, and this is a place that went out and got Golden Tate and Michael Floyd and Jeff Samardzija and Mo Stovall and even a guy like a TJ Jones and you know and I mean Dion, even what's his name? Dion, I'm drawing a blank. He was in the same class as Michael Floyd.
Dion Walker.
Yes, Dion Walker. You know, and you got plenty of guys that were really talented receivers over the years. And Kevin Austin, right? They can recruit that position. They just have to do a better job of it, and they have to do a better job developing it, and they have to do a better job of giving those type of players reason to play. And next year is going to be big for that. But also developing guys like Micah Gilbert and Cam Williams and Jaden Greathouse to their full potential is going to – KK Smith is going to help you with that. Logan Saldate, all those kids have ability. It's you're going to have to start developing your own receivers if you want to recruit that position better. That's a reality. But Notre Dame can recruit receiver better than it has. I mean, Michael Floyd was a 5-star. ESPN had Golden Tate ranked high, but most of those guys weren't like elite top 25 to 30 guys. They weren't Julio Joneses and AJ Greens outside of Michael Floyd. They were top 100 to 150 guys that had a lot of tools, and then you know, you try to get the most out of it. You don't have to recruit elite top 50 players every year at receiver to have a great passing game. That just contrary to pop. I know that's worked for Ohio State, but there's plenty of teams that throw the ball very well that don't. Right? I just watched USC with a bunch of highly ranked 5-star receivers coming to high school, and they were 6-6. Right? I mean, so you can have if you can coach that position, like if they could hire. And maybe, and this isn't a shot at Mike Brown. This is just a general statement. Okay. Maybe Mike Brown is that guy. But if they could do someone that could develop the receiver position the way that Dylan McCullough has developed the running back position and the way that Mike Mickens has developed the cornerback position, Notre Dame's winning multiple playoff games every year. Because you're talking about that guy's going to coach up Cam Williams. That guy's going to coach up Micah Gilbert. That guy's going to coach up Jaden Greathouse and Jordan Faison and Elijah Burris and Scrap Richardson. You know what I mean? Now, hopefully Mike Brown can be that guy. We're going to find out. I mean, Mike Mickens didn't have Notre Dame fans like screaming about how great he was after his first year. Matter of fact, sure. I remember going into 2021, there was a lot of people complaining about Mike Mickens. I was not one of them, but I certainly remember it. And look where he is now. You know, so that's kind of where I'm at is hopefully he can be that guy. Hopefully that he can be that guy. Hopefully Mike Brown can be that guy. But that'll be what really helps you really develop that position. And it's not just about the quarterback, because the quarterback's not the reason receivers don't come off the line with urgency. The quarterback's not the reason the receivers are way too choppy in their top ends. He's not the reason they don't attack leverage off the line. It's not why they don't use good technique on their press releases. None of that's because of the quarterback, right? So I want to see him do a better job. From what I'm told by people that I know and trust, there's a lot of people in the program that think very highly of Mike Brown. Now it's just the results have to back it up. And next year will be a huge year for him going into year 2, because we have seen coaches in year 2 take big jumps as position coaches, right? Joe Rudolph, I still have some questions about Joe Rudolph. But the job he did in year 2 was way better than the job he did in year 1. And I would argue that Mike Brown's done about as good of a job, if not better, in his first year with the receivers, when you consider the talent he's working with compared to what Joe Rudolph had in his first year with
Sure.
Blake Fisher and Joe Alt. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
And then he loses those two guys, and in year 2, he does a much better job. We saw with Mike Mickens, but he wasn't working with a great situation. He had Nick McLeod, and he had a true freshman in Clarence Lewis, who started half the year, who by the time he became a senior was transferring out of the program because he'd been passed up by a lot of guys. As soon as he started getting some talent in, you saw his development ability with his guys, not portal guys, his guys.
Right.
They needed Nick McLeod in 2020, big time. Notre Dame's not in the college football playoff. They don't get Nick McLeod out of the portal in 2020.
Agreed.
Well, he wasn't in the portal guy. He was a normal grad transfer type of guy before the portal really became a thing. I don't know that Notre Dame's in the college football playoff if he's not there in 2020. But since then, at corner, it's been all homegrown kids, right? Nickel's been a little different, but safety and corner for the most part. I mean, you had Brandon Joseph one year, and you had Rod Hurd this year as a rotation guy. But I mean, Xavier Watts, Don Schuler, they're all homegrown guys. Benjamin Morrison, Christian Gray, Leonard Moore, all homegrown guys. And they need Mike Brown to be that guy. Really need him to be the guy. Do that, and I think a lot of this stuff takes care of itself. And as you get better at more pure passers of quarterback, whether that's Kenny Minchie, whether that's Steve Angeli, whether that's CJ Carr, whether that's Blake Hebert, whether that's Noah Grubbs, or several of them in succession, right?
Right.
Your quarterback play's got to get better, right? I mean, it's got to be more of a fit of what Mike Denbrock wants, but there's a lot of things you could say Riley's got to do a better job there. Riley's got to do a better job there. But there's a lot of things that I'm critiquing this receiving room for that has nothing to do with the quarterback. Nothing. They've got to do their jobs better, and it's up to Coach Brown to get it better. So you don't have to rely on going out and getting portal guys every year in hopes of, either giving you impact players or giving you protection in case your younger guys don't pan out. You're just like, look, we're rolling, man. We know that. You never hear Notre Dame associated with transfer with portal running backs. You haven't heard a peep in the last 2 years about Notre Dame being associated with a transfer with a portal corner, a pure outside corner.
Yeah. Like
right?
transfer portal O-line.
Right. You hear Notre Dame mention any linebackers? Nope. You know what I mean? It's
Right.
like you want receiver to get there to where it's okay to go get a Malachi Fields, but like that's it. He's that missing piece. And the rest of your guys are rolling. And hopefully Mike Brown can get them there next year. Really, really hoping he can.
Yeah, I agree. I'm with you. Has a potential to do it. The receiving room has a potential to get there. And next season, I think Malachi Fields is going to come in and turn a lot of heads with what he's able to do for this program. And I'm going to be interested to hear some of the stories of not only what he does on the field, but what he does off the field to kind of help bring people along with him, right? Those have been the best transfer portal additions. Like Jordan Clark has came in and he loves Notre Dame. Man, like, he does like the Inside Scoop podcast and all that fun stuff. And he's been a great addition on defense. He's making friends and bringing people along with him because he's a kid that's played a lot of snaps in college football. So I hope that Malachi Fields kind of, emulates a little bit of that.
And I know a lot of people are down on this year's portal class. And in a lot of ways, I understand why. Chris Mitchell hasn't been what we thought he would be. I think Bo Collins, except for a couple drops, has pretty much been the player we thought he would be. Yeah. He's had a couple, like in November, had some drops, but outside, great blocker, good possession guy. He's had some really good games. Rod Hurd is kind of been, second half of the year, what I thought he would be. RJ Oben has not been what I hoped he would be. Jordan Clark's been better than I thought he would be.
Yeah.
Riley Leonard, second half of the year is pretty much what we thought he would be. Maybe a little bit better passer, but, just great leader, playmaker and all that. Mitch Jeter was, until the injuries, was what you hoped to be. But it hasn't been like, oh my gosh, you're winning a championship because of the portal class outside of Riley Leonard, right? But like, you're not where you are right now if Riley Leonard's not your quarterback. I mean, that's just
right.
Agreed. But here's one thing you can't deny, and this is where I think the staff has done a pretty good job. Name me a portal kid that doesn't seem to be completely bought in on this roster. Jordan Clark seems incredibly bought in. Riley Leonard's clearly bought in. Chris Mitchell could be a giant cancer in the locker room, and I'd almost not blame him because of the production he had at FIU and how little he's targeted. But watch him interacting with his teammates. Doesn't act that way at all. And every time he finally gets the ball, he makes the play every single time. right? RJ Oben plays with energy, and he's not the guy he was, but you look at his effort, you look at how he interacts with his teammates. He's locked in. Look at Rod Hurd celebrating with his teammates. I mean, these kids have been bought in, and that's important. And they're going to need this next portal class to be the same way, because that's huge. You can't have these portal guys coming in and, hey, it's all about me, baby. It's all about me. Yes, you came here for a purpose, for an individual reason, but it's going to have to be done within the framework of it. And I think the staff has done a phenomenal job of identifying players who are going to come in and buy into the culture
100%.
of what this place is about. And some of them come from high academic schools like Virginia's, the Northwesterns, the Dukes. Jordan Clark came from Arizona State, folks. Bo Collins came from Clemson. You know what I mean? Mitch Jeter came from South Carolina. That's not Duke. That's not Northwestern, right? Malachi Fields come from Virginia. Devontae Smith is coming from Alabama. But they've done a great job of identifying players that wherever you're from, you have the culture, you have the mindset, the mentality, the work ethic, the team-oriented aspect that you need. And that's important. That's how Notre Dame's been able to have, and there was a portal guy they got last year that was a bit of a problem in the locker room. And so he just kind of got removed from everything. You know what I mean? They didn't let it, you know what I mean? But outside of that, the portal guys, for the most part, there's only 2 portal guys that I could say, and I won't say their names. Ironically, they played the same position, that were maybe not the most well-received by their teammates kind of guys. The rest were. Nick McLeod came in here and completely bought into what Notre Dame was all about. Alohi Gilman came in here. I mean, so going in back and forth, but especially this current staff, who's got to do more than just like 1 or 2 grad transfers a year. And I think that's a big piece to this puzzle too. It's very important, and you got to hope that Malachi Fields is going to be the next in line in that regard.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. I think that's a good place to call it, Brian. What do you think? All right, guys. Well, thanks for being with us for the better part of little over 2 hours. There's going to be a lot.
One tomorrow.
One tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. 1 o'clock tomorrow?
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. So Brian and I will be going live at 1 o'clock tomorrow, and we're going to start breaking down this Sugar Bowl matchup between Notre Dame and Georgia. We're going to be looking at everything at a high level. But in order to stay in the now and you understand what's going on, make sure to hit that like button, that subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you know when we go live. Share this podcast with your friends and family and anybody that you know loves Notre Dame as much as you do. Best way to support us, like I said, is subscribe to us at boards.irishbreakdown.com. That's where we're going to put out all of the content. There's going to be film breakdowns, various articles, and we're working on different ways to do things exclusively for board members. So really excited for all the things that are going to be coming out. If you're traveling for the holiday, please travel safe, wherever you're headed. Enjoy time with friends and family, because Christmas Eve is tomorrow. But with it being Christmas Eve, Brian and I will be back tomorrow at 1 o'clock. So until then, it's my man Brian. I'm Trevor Trowbridge. We will see you back here tomorrow on the Irish Breakdown podcast.